Hello, legacy-minded men, and this is session 3 of talking about being dropped as a boy and silenced as a man. And when we left Mephibosheth last, he has now gone from the palace to the ghetto. He's in a place of silence. He's lame in both feet. He doesn't fit in. He's got all kinds of wonderful self-esteem issues. And you know what? He probably thought that's where he's going to be the rest of his life. And I say that because the first time that David's person found him, his answer, or when he talked to David, either one, reflected his thought. Why would you want to talk to me? I'm nothing more than a dog. That sounds like pretty low self-esteem. So now here's Mephibosheth. King David had made a covenant with Mephibosheth's father, Jonathan. And that covenant was, I will take care of your kids, your people forever. They won't have to worry about anything. So King David sends out his guy to go look. The guy happens to say, hey, by the way, there's a guy in Lodabar, and he's lame in his feet because his nurse dropped him, but he's Jonathan's son. Oh, then go. So Mephibosheth meets this guy. He brings him back to King David, and David says, I made a covenant with your father. Are you him? Yes. And that's where Mephibosheth says, why would you want me? I'm nothing more than a dog. In other words, that was how he saw himself. That was his self-esteem. David restores him back to the palace. So let's go through the process. Young, naive, innocent child, living in a palace, growing up with all the cool soldiers. Tragedy happens. Sent to a ghetto, no voice, no growth, no life, lame forever, expected to be there, self-esteem is in the toilet, and now, all of a sudden, on a particular day, here's a guy saying, hey, by the way, are you Mephibosheth? Because I've got something for you. Basically, he won the lottery. It happened. It changed overnight. Everything about his life changed. Now he's brought back to the palace where life started. Interesting enough, in this story, the nurse, the person who dropped him, took him to a place that was a ghetto. Now, this is for somebody. The person who dropped you is usually the same person who wants to keep you in a ghetto mindset that you don't have a voice, there's no growth, because their system is so dysfunctional, they want you to be a part of it. Think about that for a second. The person who dropped you, and the way they treat you, and the way that they act towards you, and all of the things connected to their behavior in their world, it represents a ghetto, not having a voice. What happens when you live in a dysfunctional family? You grew up in a dysfunctional family, and you tell them they're a dysfunctional family? They will shut you down. They will tell you you don't understand. They will tell you don't talk about this outside because no one else would understand. Don't do X because you're not supposed to. What about as an adult and you're in a political system in your job or in your work and you want to say, hey, this isn't right, we shouldn't be doing this, and they say, you don't understand the system. You don't understand things about it. That's kind of like being in a ghetto, isn't it? So the king restores him to the palace, full circle. He ate at the king's table. He was still lame, but he ate at the king's table. But now people who see him sitting at the table, they don't see lameness first. They see the person who's sitting at the table, because his legs would have been under the tablecloth. It would have been hidden from what everybody's seeing. So you may still have lameness in your life, but when you sit at the king's table, the lameness isn't what is seen first. I wanted to transition a little bit in this teaching to answering the question, why do we do some of the same things over and over and over and over and over? Why does that happen in our brain? Two issues really. Number one is Romans chapter 2, verse 1. Wherein, O man, you are inexcusable, for when you make a judgment, you condemn yourselves to do the same things. Like I said, my father had a temper. I grew up seeing that. You had to say certain things and not say certain things because somebody could get hurt. I don't fault him for that. I know what his upbringing was. And now at his age, he has walked in forgiveness for a long time, and the Lord has restored his soul, and I'm happy to say that. But I made a judgment. I remember being 11 years old and standing in my father's living room. And I said, I hate the way you are. I will never be like you. You know what happened? I grew up as a teenager and a young adult with that same stupid anger issue. I know what it is to get so angry that if you don't hit something, you feel like you'll explode on the inside. And by the way, if you hit your refrigerator as hard as you can, it won't really make a dent in the refrigerator. But you will think you broke every bone in your hand. Ask me this later, I can tell you the story. Okay? But I know what it is to have that same anger that I saw in my father. And then I know also what it is to be forgiven of that, because the Lord showed me several years later what I was becoming. And he took that anger away, and it was an amazing experience. But also, I want to talk to you just a minute about your brain. So the brain is this really cool organ. It weighs about 3 pounds. It kind of feels all squishy like Jell-O. And inside your brain are these really cool neural pathways and like superhighways and electrical impulses that flow and all these kind of neat things that God made. It's amazing how your brain, you cannot have two thoughts at the same time. And your brain is the fastest computer ever made because it can communicate to trillions of neurons in a nanosecond, which is really awesome. But here's what happens. Let's go back for a second to driving, learning how to drive, or getting driving lessons when you were 15 or 16 years of age. Do you remember the first day you got in the car after you got your license and you can drive? You didn't want the radio on. You didn't want to have any coffee or soda. You didn't want anybody talking in your car. You didn't want any distractions. You had your hands on 10 and 2. The mirror was perfect. You drove the speed limit because you are keenly aware of everything that's going on in that car. Now, fast forward 20 years, you've got a soda, you've got 4 people in the car, you've got kids that are screaming, you've got the radio going, and you're driving with 2 fingers. What changed it? It's still the same car, it's still the same surrounding. What changed? What changed is you developed neural pathways inside your brain that are called driving. And repetitive experience of something makes those pathways grow longer. So now it becomes automatic. Think about this. The brain operates on a use it or lose it principle, meaning that the neurons that you don't need, it turns them off or prunes them, as scientists would tell us. So if there's a pathway system, let's think about this. There's a pathway system in your brain, let's call it a healthy home. So as a baby, home is fine, life is great, nurturance, take care of you, change your diapers, they love you, hold you, hug you, the whole 9 yards. And your brain develops these cool pathways that we'll call a healthy home. Then, because the brain operates on a use it or lose it principle, now stress enters. Mom and dad are starting to fight a little bit. Maybe they're going to get a divorce. Maybe there's financial problems. Maybe there's not quite enough food. Maybe, lots of different tags. Your brain begins to adjust to the stress. It begins to turn off the pathways of the healthy system, and it begins to create new pathways for unhealthy family system. The brain literally begins to change. And as those actions are repetitive or repeated, those pathways get stronger. So now things that are in your life that we would call habits are natural to you because you've been doing them so long. Whether it's anger, depression, workaholic, athlete, Pick your pathway. It's all the same. But you have repeated the actions and the beliefs and all the behaviors all these years to where the things that you're doing become automatic. And you're not even aware of what you're doing. Or maybe you are aware and you figure, how can I change it? Well, if we go back to the beginning, the brain operates on a use it or lose it principle. If your brain is used to all of the pathways related to X behavior and you don't want to have X behavior, you've got to create Y. Guess what happens? If you create new experiences, new relationships, new information coming in to be processed, guess what happens? The brain will discard or prune or turn off the unhealthy pathways that aren't being used, and it will create new pathways that will change your behavior. I know that sounds really simplistic, and you go, yeah, that's too good to be true. No, it's actually true. It's how your brain operates. Does it happen overnight? No, of course not. Does it happen if I'm not aware of it? No, of course not. The Father's heart for all of us is to come find us. Whatever that looks like. My father, my natural father, found me one day on a Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had finished graduate school. I was a professional counselor. I was in private practice. And I had a new Thursday 2 o'clock appointment. I didn't know the name. It was a new client. At 2 o'clock, my father walks in. And I said, what are you doing here? He said, I'm your 2 o'clock. I paid for this hour. I want to tell you my story. And my father sat down with me and told me how he was raised on a farm and what that meant and how his father drove him in working and all the dysfunctional things that happened in that family and how he was a product of it. And then from there it went to, but son, I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of what you've become, and I'm proud that you're not like me. The king sent someone to find me. It changed my life. I was able to forgive my father, restore our relationship, and for 30 plus years, we've had a pretty amazing relationship. My closing thing to you today is this: the king's heart is to find you. He's made a covenant. He wants to find you. He wants to bring you out of the place of silence, out of the ghetto, out of the lameness that's happened to you, and he wants to bring you to the king's table. He wants to take you in a process where people don't see your lameness first, but they see you. He wants to restore you. And I know that Legacy-Minded Men is the place for you to find some answers. I know there are people that are part of this ministry that can talk to you about this. Reach out to them. Let the king's emissary find you and work with you. Thank you for watching.